Hi guys, welcome to Watch Hobbyist channel. So today I've got for you the Rolex Bruiser. Right, this is a watch that I wasn't really interested in for a long time. I think it came out around about 2013 is when it was announced, but recently I've really been on a blue watch trip. I've got another blue watch on the way, which is a secret, but I think you'll like it when I do finally get it. And this one is no exception. It's still quite rare, quite hard to find. Then I had the blue Yachtmaster for a little while recently, and I think, oh yeah, sorry, I've got the blue tag as well, haven't I? That's in my last review, which you will have seen if you subscribe to the channel. So blue seems to certainly be a thing for me right now. I like the colour anyway. I've always liked blue. It reminds you of the ocean, of the sky, all nice holiday things. So I started looking for another watch recently, and it ended up where I was sort of getting drawn towards this watch, which, like I say, is something that's never really appealed so much in the past. Now, I have had the GMT. I've had the GMT previously, the standard model, and I must admit I very much like the two-tone model. They do the ceramic GMT with gold and black theme to it. But back to this one, I could have got the standard black model, but then I've got, you know, black and steel watches. It would have been no different to a lot of other things that I've got or had. And when I started looking into this, I was actually quite surprised at how hard it seems to actually source one from a dealer. For example, you know, you can normally ring up and get the standard black model, no issue at all. You can just ring up, they've probably got one, and you'll have it that day, done, finished. This one, there does seem to be waiting lists on it. I'm sure from dealer to dealer it varies greatly. But I did actually find one at a dealer's, but when I went to the dealers to go and buy it, they really annoyed me with a couple of things, and I was just like, no, forget this, I'm not giving you my business. And although that seems probably daft to walk out of a store when you've got the opportunity to get one, I thought, no, if I'm spending this much money, it's going to be with somebody I actually want to deal with. So that actually turned out to be really fortuitous. Reason being that this used one came along, from somebody that I've not dealt with before but knew of, so I was happy to deal with them. The watch does need a bit of a refurb at the minute, but I thought before I send it away for all that, I'll sort of review it and show you what I think of the watch. So the reason why this watch is a little bit harder to get is mainly because of the bezel. As you'll have noticed, and obviously the main reason you're probably watching this video for this particular version, is that it's black and blue. Now, black and blue is not unheard of, but black and blue in the same ceramic one-piece bezel is actually apparently a very difficult process. And I've heard numbers thrown around, but for something like every 10 bezels that they produce at Rolex, 9 of them go in the bin, you know, that sort of thing. I don't know how true that is, but apparently what I'm getting at is that it's a very difficult process to create a one-piece bezel that has two colours of ceramic in there, and therefore there's less of these models, which means that they're on a bit of a waiting list, which means that demand goes up because supply and demand and all that stuff, and it has created its own sort of market, this watch. If you look at the price of this watch brand new to the price of the black one, there is a difference, but there's a much greater sort of paradigm between this one and the black one on the used market. This one actually seems to trade generally around about its price point retail, whether it's used or new or whatever. So, you know, it is probably a good buy if you're looking for a watch that you don't want to worry too much about financially. It does seem to be sort of a decent buy in that for that reason. The GMT hand on this model is actually blue as well. Now, it does tend to sort of disappear into the dial, which, you know, on a sunny day is fine actually. You can see it really well, but you're looking at it now through the camera, and actually on the camera I can see it really well, but when I'm looking at the watch head on in reality, I can actually barely see that hand. So certain lights that hand does disappear, and some people might actually like that because it sort of makes it look a bit more like a Submariner, I guess. You've still got the Cyclops going on. The Cyclops is anti-reflective coated, so there is like a bit of a blue hue to that, to the actual Cyclops itself, which is like the magnifying glass above the date, whereas the crystal itself doesn't have that. And it's always a shame, I think, that they don't have anti-reflective coatings, because it helps with you know, it does certainly help with contrast and things, but it's not too bad in terms of reflections on this watch. It's not as bad as some other watches I've had from Rolex, where, you know, the dial details can't really be seen at all. This does have much better contrast. We also have luminescence to all the hour markers around the dial, And on the hands as well, we have it to second hand lollipop, we have it to the Mercedes hands, the the GMT hand as well. So really good lume. It's the chromalite lume. It's like a bluey, well, a more like aqua blue sort of colour. So it fits in very nicely with the colour scheme as well of this watch. Now in terms of dimensions, the GMT is a really nice watch for most people's wrists, to be honest. You have just a 48mm lug to lug. So if you've watched my review on the Patek Philippe Aquanaut, you'll know that that has a 46.5mm lug to lug, and that's a really nice size. So the GMT is only a little bit longer in its total length, so 48mm is not too bad. Height wise, so from here to here, I've measured it, it's around about sort of 14mm I think with the Cyclops, so probably around about 12 or 13 without the Cyclops. So not a particularly thick watch, and it sort of justifies its thickness anyway. It's not as thick as the Submariner, which has a much thicker case back, more of a bubble back to that watch. This sits quite flat on the wrist, and it is definitely worth trying this watch out if you are going to buy one rather than just buying one online type of thing, because sometimes it can sit very, very flat and maybe look a little bit odd on certain people's wrists I've seen. But on my wrist, as you can see now, it actually I feel wears very well. So this watch is also a 40mm diameter case, but the 40mm diameter on this watch is a little bit misleading because you do have very thick lugs. So that's going to be great in the future when you get this watch polished, because over time the lugs can be polished many more times, should I say, than say a standard older sort of Rolex, which does have very thin lugs. And you see them now 30 years down the line, and that some of them have got barely any lug left. They just look ridiculous, and they're worth very little because people want sort of originality. So that can only be good for things like that, but it does also give it sort of quite a hefty sort of look. But I do like the look of this watch. My wrist is 6.75 inches, so that helps you hopefully estimate the size compared to yourself. But the watch, I think, wears well. I think it has sort of a very businessy like sort of appeal to it. It is sporty as well, so it's quite a good all-rounder. So there's the watch sort of head on towards the camera, and you can see how, hopefully you can see how the colour of the blue on the bezel actually changes. So in different light it goes from a very dark colour to a very light colour, and I don't think it's really, it's certainly not like a fluted bezel of a Rolex day date or something like that, but it does have a nice effect to it. You can see also, as you move the watch around, the blue hand there, which is green on the standard model, but in this case it's blue. It does sort of, disappear into the dial a bit, in my opinion. And especially now you can see like the GMT hand is over one of the markers, and it starts to sort of disappear a bit, which in some ways is actually quite nice because it becomes a bit more of a stealth GMT watch than one that's totally in your face. The movement itself, in regards to the GMT, I call it a true GMT, and the reason I call it that is because there are some watches out there that class themselves as GMTs, and when you go to adjust the GMT function of the watch, it adjusts the outer hand. Now that's not really much good, because if you wake up at 3 in the morning, you're not really going to be able to tell where the hand is on the dial. So it's good for if you want to keep just a reference time or whatever, but it's not ideal. I think the best way to have a GMT function, to be honest with you, is how Rolex do it, and there are other brands that do it as well. But the reason it's different to some of those that I've mentioned just now, when you pull the crown to the very first position, you can see that the second hand's carried on, okay? But if I want to now, say I now take off and I go on a plane, I go to a new destination, and all I have to do is do that. This hour hand here now moves ahead by 1 hour, and that's also how you set the date. So some people don't particularly like that you can't quick set the date, you have to go through this. So if you don't wear the watch a lot, that's when that becomes a little bit more difficult. But at the same time, it's also quite useful because you can go backwards. So, if you haven't worn it for, say, 3 weeks or so, it might be easier to go backwards than go forwards. Overall, I actually prefer this method. I like Omega watches because they have generally the quick set hour hands on a lot of their models, which aren't even GMT watches. So, I've always liked it. Some people do, some people don't. If you pull the crown out to the full position, then you'll set the time. Now setting the time on a GMT watch is a little bit different. So you actually set the watch using the GMT hand itself. So I'll bring it down to here, okay. So we're at 12 midday, okay, on the GMT hand there. So we'll go to 12 o'clock there. So that is 12 o'clock on the GMT hand. Now if I pop the crown back in, go to the first point on the crown, now I can move the hand so that it matches up to the 12, okay. And basically now it's 12 on there and 12 on there. Close it, and now we know it's basically 12 o'clock, and that is how the GMT function is going to work. I'm going to know it's 12 o'clock midday rather than 12 o'clock midnight, that type of thing. You know, it's helping you out there. Then if we go away, you know, you just move your hour hand to say there, so you've gone 2 hours ahead. You now know it's 2 o'clock in the new time, and it's 12 o'clock noon back home. And that's basically how it works. So that's the whole point of a GMT watch. It's great for pilots, it's great for travellers, you know, and it's just a nice little complication as well. Now, just while I talk about the crown, it is a trip lock crown. It does have the seal there, so don't take me for word on this, but apparently if you were to forget about that, just leave it in the first sort of just at the unscrewed position and go swimming, apparently the watch is still waterproof. So that's, you know, obviously a nice thought that you're hopefully not going to ruin this watch if you were forgetful in that way. Now the watch itself, the case is made of 904L steel, as is the bracelet. All solid links all the way through, so it does have quite a heft to it. I would have thought it's going on for probably 160 or so grams, something like that. So it's not a light watch, but it's not a heavy watch. And it's nicely balanced as well. The bracelet balances out the case quite nicely. The bracelet is a little bit controversial for some people because it's not all brushed. So a lot of Rolex sports watches are all brushed all the way through. This actually has polished centre links, and those catch scratches. Now this watch is a couple of years old, and there are sort of, you know, light hairlines in there. There's nothing absolutely major on the bracelet, but it does get scratches, and it ends up where you get enough scratches in the polished centre links that you can't actually see so much the difference between the satin to the polish to the satin. So, you know, if you're going to get a polished centre link watch, it's always something to consider. If you're bothered about scratches, then you're going to see more scratches on a watch like this than you would, say, a Submariner or a Sea Dweller. But I have seen some people brush the centre links, but I personally wouldn't do that. I'm too much of an originality freak, and at the same time I think that this is quite a sort of businessy looking watch. You know, it works well with a suit, but it's also sporty, and so what, you get some scratches. It's the character of the watch after a few years, isn't it? I think it's nice that not all the Rolex watches you go and buy all have satin bracelets. So you can brush it if you absolutely wanted to, but be aware that if you did do that and then you decided you wanted to polish the centre links again, it's very, very hard to polish the centre links to a factory finish, even from a professional's perspective, without taking away a lot of metal after you've brushed it. So just be aware. The clasp is what we've seen before. It's the Easy Link clasp. So you have this section here which is actually sprung, and it clicks into place. All done with ceramic ball bearings and things like that going on. If you want to adjust the watch sort of quickly, you have the Easy Link area of the clasp here. So that's now taken away 5mm, so it's made the watch tighter. And then if it was a hot day and you wanted to expand the bracelet quickly, just pull it out, you've got an extra 0.5 centimetre for your expanded wrist. The movement inside is the 3186. It replaced the 3185, which had a little bit of wobble to it when you adjusted things, but there's not too much difference apart from that. 48-hour power reserve, absolute workhorse. If you go and buy a Rolex now, it's going to be -2 +2 second accuracy, so you don't have to worry about accuracy. They're all sort of regulated after they've been cased up and everything, so you're going to get a nice accurate watch. Lume's great, size is great, weight's not too bad, it's 100 meters water resistant, it's not too thick. You know, you've got a date function, you've got the quick set hour hand, you've got the bezel which has a fantastic feel to it with ceramic ball bearings with the hour stops and the half-hour stops. So all in all, a very, very usable watch that could quite easily last a lifetime, I'm sure. Screw down case back, you know, which doesn't have a big bubble to it, it's nice and flat. I've always liked the sort of join of the bracelet to the case underneath, you know, always works really, really nicely. Screwed in links so if you want to adjust the links, you actually just use a 1.6mm screwdriver and you'll be able to adjust those no problem. And also the clasp itself, the actual easy link area, can be moved up and down. There's actually three spring bar points inside that clasp, which give even more sort of manoeuvrability of the bracelet along the clasp. So you can generally find the perfect fit with a watch like this. It's one of those watches that is a pretty much perfect for anybody type of watch. The size is fine, you know, it's not too big really, and you should be able to enjoy it very much, I'm sure. That's if you can find one. So that is the Rolex GMT BLNR. It's the blue and black. I hope you've enjoyed the review. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel, and please make sure you subscribe to my Instagram account, where you will see any watches that I try out, or I pick up, or I try my friends' watches, or that sort of thing. The Instagram account is instagram.com/watchhobbyist. That's 2 H's in the middle, all one word. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.